I always thought of myself as a filial child, always trying to help my family overcome difficulties. But just one mistaken message changed everything. It wasn't just disappointment, but the deepest betrayal I had ever experienced. That evening, in my small office, I sat silently staring at my phone screen, the light reflecting on my emotionally charged face. Outside, heavy rain fell, each drop hitting the window as if joining the storm raging within me. The message was from my older brother, Ryan, but it wasn't meant for me. It was part of a secret group chat that he and my parents had created to mock and discuss how to milk me dry. On the screen, the words were clear: "Family ATM just sent another $3,000. Haha, let's keep this money train running." Immediately following was a message from Dad: "Haha, that's right. She's so stupid she doesn't realize we're taking advantage of her." And then my mother added, "Just bought your father a new set of golf clubs. Emily would freak out if she knew that money wasn't for medicine." I couldn't believe my eyes. The messages kept appearing, each word like a knife twisting deeper into my heart. They had been laughing at my generosity for years, planning lavish vacations and buying expensive things while lying that they couldn't afford medical bills or house repairs. I had sacrificed so much for them, working myself ragged 60 hours a week, postponing my dream of buying my own house, and even cutting back on personal expenses, only to be mocked behind my back. My phone kept buzzing with a series of calls and messages from my family. Each person tried to justify themselves. Dad said they were just joking around, Mom said I was misunderstanding them, and Ryan insisted he only did it to keep the peace with Mom and Dad. But what they wrote had exposed everything, the raw and cruel truth. The rain outside grew heavier, as if the heavens were empathizing with my pain. I got up from my chair when I heard a loud knock at the door. Through the peephole, I saw Ryan standing there, soaked in the rain, his eyes full of pleading. I clenched my phone in my hand, feeling anger and hurt surge within me. I wasn't ready to face him, but maybe this was exactly the moment to say everything I needed to say. I opened the door but blocked the entrance, my gaze coldly fixed on my brother. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice firm. Ryan lowered his head, rainwater dripping from his hair onto his face. "Emily, please, just let me explain," he said in a trembling voice. But I didn't want to hear any more empty excuses. I held up my phone in front of his face, the screen still displaying the message he had sent: "Just tell Emily Dad needs dental surgery." "Kaching." "Explain," I said, my voice as cold as ice. "Explain how you all could laugh at my kindness like this for all these years?" Ryan tried to say something, but his words only fueled my anger. "Mom and Dad started it. I just went along with it." I let out a bitter laugh. "So you were just following orders? Like a financial accomplice?" I couldn't hold back anymore. "Do you know how much money that is? $3,000 a month for 5 years. And that's not even counting all the other emergencies you fabricated." Ryan hung his head in silence as I continued, "You've taken everything, my time, my energy, and my trust." I took a deep breath to regain my composure before continuing. "Ryan, go home. Tell Mom and Dad that the old Emily is gone. Now there's just Emily, and Emily will never be taken advantage of again." Emily stood at the door, watching Ryan leave in the pouring rain. She knew this confrontation was only the beginning of an inevitable series of events. And true to her prediction, less than an hour later, her phone started ringing incessantly. This time it was her mother, Linda, calling. She answered, and her mother's angry voice boomed through the line: "Emily, how could you do this to your family? Don't you see you're destroying everything?" Emily took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Mom, I'm not destroying anything. I'm just taking back what's rightfully mine, my own life." But Linda didn't let her finish. "Family is everything, Emily. You can't abandon us just because your feelings are hurt. Your father is so worried, his blood pressure is through the roof because of this." Emily let out a bitter laugh over the phone. "Dad's blood pressure? Real blood pressure, or like those fake medical bills you fabricated to get money from me?" Silence hung in the air for a few seconds on the other end, then Linda continued, her voice now shifting to pleading: "Emily, I'm sorry if we went too far. But we need you. Without you, we'll lose the house. Anger flared up in Emily again. You bought that house with my money. You told me you were renting a small apartment and couldn't afford the rent. But it turned out you bought a luxury lakeside apartment and called it a retirement home. And now you're turning around and blaming me? Linda choked up. We had no other choice, Emily. You're the only one who can help us. Emily interrupted. No, Mom. You had plenty of choices. But you chose to take advantage of me, time and time again. The conversation ended with a heavy sigh from Linda before she hung up. Emily put her phone down on the table, feeling exhaustion wash over her. But she knew this wasn't the end. The next day, her parents and Ryan showed up at her door unannounced. They stood there with expressions that were a mix of anger and desperation. Emily stepped outside, closing the door behind her and crossing her arms. What do you want? She asked bluntly. Her father, Richard, stepped forward, his voice authoritative. We need to talk like a family. Emily stared at him, her eyes cold. Family? Real family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me. Richard started to raise his voice. You can't do this to your parents. After everything we've done for you, Emily cut him off. Everything you've done for me? What do you mean by that? Is it about you exploiting me for the past 5 years? Is it about you mocking me behind my back while I sacrificed everything to help you? Linda sobbed. Emily, we're sorry. We're really sorry. But Emily just shook her head. You're not sorry for hurting me. You're only sorry you got caught. Ryan chimed in. Emily, please, think about Mom and Dad. They need you. Emily turned to her brother and replied in a chilling tone. They don't need me. They need my money. And that ends now. She stepped back and opened her front door, looking at them one last time. I hope you find a way to live within your means. But from now on, I won't be your solution anymore. Before closing the door, she added one last sentence. Goodbye. As their footsteps faded away from her porch, Emily leaned back against the door and closed her eyes. She didn't feel guilt or regret, only an immense sense of relief flooded her mind. She had finally taken back her own life. The next morning, Emily woke up with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. The betrayal was still fresh, but the path forward was now unmistakably clear. She had spent too long entangled in the web of manipulation and deceit spun by her own family. It was time to take action, to reclaim her life, and to sever every financial tie that had turned her into nothing more than a resource for their indulgence. Sitting at her desk, Emily opened her laptop and began methodically reviewing her finances. The first step was simple but monumental, canceling the monthly transfers she had been sending to her parents' joint account for the past 5 years. Logging into her banking portal, she found the recurring $3,000 payment that had been draining her account every month. Her finger hovered over the Cancel Transfer button for a moment, a flicker of hesitation creeping in. But then she remembered the mocking words from their group chat. She's too stupid to realize we're using her. With a deep breath, she clicked the button. It was done. Next, Emily turned her attention to the investment account she had set up 3 years ago, a secret retirement fund meant to surprise her parents when they turned 70. She had been contributing $1,000 monthly, building it up to over $40,000. The irony wasn't lost on her. While they were laughing at her generosity, she had been planning for their future. After confirming her identity with the bank representative, Emily closed the account and redirected the funds back to her primary savings. The weight lifted slightly from her chest as she realized that money could now be used for herself, for the dreams she had put on hold for far too long. But there were still more ties to cut. Emily called her health insurance provider next. 2 years ago, she had added her parents as dependents to ensure they had access to quality medical care. Now, knowing that many of their supposed health issues were fabricated, she couldn't justify keeping them on the policy. After explaining the situation to a sympathetic representative, she successfully removed them as dependents effective at the end of the month. They'll receive notification soon, the representative said kindly. This gives them 30 days to find alternative coverage. Emily thanked him and hung up, feeling another layer of freedom settle over her. The final step was perhaps the hardest, writing an email to confront them directly. Emily opened a blank document and began typing with steady determination. Subject: Financial Support Termination. Dear Mom and Dad. Attached is a comprehensive accounting of all financial support I have provided over the past 5 years, totaling $221,865. This includes monthly transfers, emergency funds, medical expenses, and contributions to a supplemental retirement account I established for you. As of today, all recurring transfers have been stopped. You have been removed as dependents from my health insurance policy effective May 31st, and the retirement account has been closed. Your actions, documented through screenshots of your own messages, have revealed a pattern of manipulation and deceit that I can no longer tolerate. Do not contact me again unless it is to repay what you have taken under false pretenses. Sincerely, Emily Carter. She read through it twice before attaching the 12-page document she had compiled detailing every dollar sent and every fabricated emergency they had used against her. With one final breath, she hit send. It was over. For good measure, Emily blocked their phone numbers and removed them from all social media platforms. She even reached out to Megan, her best friend and attorney, for advice on how to handle any potential legal retaliation from them. You've done everything right, Megan reassured her. Now it's time to focus on yourself. The first few days after cutting ties were eerily quiet. Emily expected an immediate backlash but instead found herself enjoying an unfamiliar sense of peace. She treated herself to a day off work, something she hadn't done in years, and spent it wandering through art galleries and sipping coffee at a cozy cafe downtown. For once, every dollar she spent felt like an investment in herself rather than a sacrifice for someone else. But by day 3, the silence broke. Her phone buzzed with emails from new addresses after she had blocked their usual ones. Her mother's messages were filled with guilt-tripping pleas. Your father's health is deteriorating because of your behavior. Her father's tone was angrier. Stop this nonsense immediately. And Ryan? He simply wrote, Mom and Dad can't pay their mortgage without you. Emily forwarded every message to Megan without responding. She knew better than to engage. Any reply would only open the door for further manipulation. That evening, as Emily sat reviewing client proposals at home, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. Through the peephole, she saw them, her parents and Ryan, standing on her porch in the pouring rain. Their faces were a mix of anger and desperation. For a moment, Emily felt a pang of guilt rise in her chest, but it quickly dissipated as she remembered everything they had done. She didn't open the door. Instead, she texted Ryan, I have nothing more to say. Please leave or I will call the police. Through the peephole, she watched him show his phone to their parents before engaging in what appeared to be a heated discussion. Eventually, they left, but not before her father shouted one final warning, you'll regret this. We're family. Emily leaned against the door after they were gone, letting out a long exhale. The word family no longer held any power over her. It wasn't about blood, it was about trust and respect. And they had shattered both beyond repair. For the first time in years, Emily felt free, not just financially but emotionally as well. She wasn't their ATM anymore, she was finally just herself. And that was enough. The silence following Emily's decisive actions didn't last long. By the next morning, her inbox was flooded with emails from her family. Her mother's messages were a mix of guilt-tripping and melodrama. Your father's health is suffering because of your behavior. His blood pressure is through the roof. Her father's tone was more direct and angry. Stop this nonsense immediately. You're being childish. And Ryan? His plea was simple but telling. Mom and Dad can't pay their mortgage without you. Emily read each message with a strange sense of detachment. She forwarded them all to Megan, her attorney and confidant, without a single reply. She had made her stance clear, and engaging with their manipulation now would only undo the progress she had worked so hard to achieve. That evening, as Emily sat reviewing client proposals in her living room, the doorbell rang. She froze for a moment, her heart racing slightly. Through the peephole, she saw them, her parents and Ryan, standing on her porch in the pouring rain. Their faces were a blend of anger and desperation, their postures tense as if they were preparing for battle. Emily didn't open the door. Instead, she texted Ryan, "I have nothing more to say. Please leave or I will call the police." Through the peephole, she watched Ryan check his phone and show the message to their parents. A heated argument broke out among them, with her mother gesturing wildly and her father's face turning an alarming shade of red. Emily stood silently behind the door, her breathing steady but her resolve firm. Eventually, they left, but not before her father shouted one last time, "You'll regret this. We're family." The irony of his words wasn't lost on Emily. Family? The people who had mocked her generosity and exploited her kindness for years? No, she thought to herself as she leaned against the door. Family wasn't supposed to feel like this. The next few days brought more attempts at contact, emails from unknown addresses, voicemails from blocked numbers, even a handwritten letter delivered by certified mail. In it, her mother wrote, "We don't understand why you're punishing us like this. Yes, we made some jokes in poor taste, but that's what families do. Your father's medication is $450 a month without insurance. Our mortgage is due next week, and we can't cover it without your help. Do you want your elderly parents to be homeless?" Emily nearly laughed at the word elderly. Her parents were both 65 and in good health, her father's golf game alone was proof of that. Still, she decided to verify their claims about his medication costs. A quick call to the pharmacy revealed the truth. His prescription cost only $42 per month without insurance. Another lie. By the end of that week, Ryan showed up at Emily's office unannounced as she was leaving for lunch. He looked disheveled, dark circles under his eyes and clothes rumpled as if he hadn't slept in days. "Emily," he said, stepping in front of her car. "Please, they're falling apart." Emily crossed her arms and stared at him coldly. "That's not my problem." Ryan's voice cracked as he pleaded, "Dad's talking about bankruptcy. They're going to lose everything." Emily raised an eyebrow. "You mean the condo they bought while telling me they couldn't afford rent? Or maybe it's the luxury car payments they prioritized over actual necessities?" "They made mistakes," Ryan admitted weakly. "No," Emily cut him off sharply. "A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday or misplacing your keys. What they did was calculated and cruel, for years." Ryan hesitated before saying softly, "They're talking about moving in with me. I can't handle that." Emily tilted her head slightly and replied with icy calm, "That sounds like a you problem." She stepped around him and got into her car, leaving him standing there speechless. Over the next 2 weeks, Emily received sporadic updates through mutual acquaintances and social media posts she hadn't yet unfollowed. Her parents had listed their condo for sale, her father's car had been repossessed, they had cancelled their country club membership, a loss that seemed to sting them more than anything else. Each new piece of information brought a fleeting pang of guilt that Emily quickly dismissed by recalling their betrayal in vivid detail, the screenshots of mocking messages, the fabricated emergencies designed to extract money from her without question. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, Emily received an email from an unfamiliar address with the subject line, "Message from your parents." It detailed how they had been forced to sell most of their furniture and apply for food stamps, something her proud father found humiliating, and concluded with a plea for reconciliation. They just want a chance to explain and apologize. Emily stared at the email for a long moment before hitting delete without hesitation. Their idea of an apology would only be whatever they thought might turn the money faucet back on, and she wasn't falling for it again. For the first time in years, Emily felt something unexpected, freedom. Emily sat in the soft, inviting chair of Dr. Bennett's office, her hands gripping a warm cup of tea as she tried to find the words to begin. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of emotions, anger, sadness, guilt, and even relief, but now, sitting in this quiet space, she felt an unfamiliar sense of calm. Dr. Bennett, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a steady demeanor, waited patiently as Emily gathered her thoughts. I don't even know where to start, Emily finally said, her voice trembling slightly. Every day, I swing between feeling strong and feeling horrible. One moment I'm proud of myself for standing up to them, and the next, I feel like the worst daughter in the world. Dr. Bennett nodded gently. That's completely normal, Emily. You're grieving, not just the loss of your relationship with your family, but also the version of them you thought you had. It's a complicated kind of grief, because it's mixed with betrayal. Emily stared at the cup in her hands, the steam rising and dissipating into the air. I keep thinking about everything I sacrificed for them, my time, my money, my dreams, and for what? So they could laugh at me behind my back? I feel so stupid. You're not stupid, Dr. Bennett said firmly. You were kind and generous. Those are qualities to be proud of. The fact that they took advantage of your kindness says everything about them and nothing about you. Emily felt tears welling up, but blinked them away quickly. It's just, I don't know who I am without that role anymore. For years, I've been the successful daughter, the one who fixes everything, who makes sure everyone else is okay. Now that I've stopped doing that, I feel lost. Dr. Bennett leaned forward slightly, her tone both compassionate and direct. That role became a big part of your identity because it was reinforced by your family's needs and their manipulation. But now you have an opportunity to redefine who you are on your own terms. Who is Emily when she's not taking care of everyone else? The question hung in the air for a moment as Emily considered it. I don't know, she admitted softly. I've spent so much time worrying about their happiness that I don't even know what mine looks like. That's okay, Dr. Bennett reassured her. This is your time to figure that out, to explore what brings you joy and fulfillment without guilt or obligation attached to it. Emily nodded slowly, feeling a small flicker of hope ignite within her. I guess that's why I'm here, she said with a faint smile. Dr. Bennett smiled back warmly. Exactly. And we'll take it one step at a time. As the session continued, Emily found herself opening up about things she hadn't even realized were weighing on her, how she'd always felt responsible for fixing her family's problems, how their approval had become a measure of her self-worth, and how freeing it felt to finally say no, even if it came with its own set of challenges. By the end of the hour, Emily felt lighter than she had in weeks. As she stood to leave, Dr. Bennett offered one final piece of advice: remember, healing isn't linear. Some days will be harder than others, but every step you take toward understanding yourself is progress. Walking out into the crisp afternoon air, Emily felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: possibility. For years, her life had revolved around meeting everyone else's needs. Now it was time to focus on her own. Later that evening, as she sat on her couch with a journal open on her lap, Emily began listing things she wanted to do, not for anyone else but for herself. Travel to Italy. Take a pottery class. Start running again. The list grew longer with each passing minute, and with it came a sense of excitement she hadn't felt in years. For the first time since everything had unraveled, Emily realized that cutting ties with her family wasn't just an ending, it was also a beginning. A chance to rebuild her life on her own terms and discover who she truly was beyond their expectations and demands. And for the first time in years, that thought didn't scare her, it inspired her. Emily had been expecting something like this. After weeks of silence, the sudden knock on her door one evening didn't come as a surprise. She set down her cup of tea and walked cautiously to the door, peering through the peephole. There they were, her parents and Ryan, standing on her porch, their faces a mix of desperation and determination. The sight stirred a strange combination of emotions: anger, sadness, and an odd sense of finality. She took a deep breath and opened the door just enough to speak, but not enough to invite them in. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. Her mother, Linda, stepped forward, her eyes already glistening with tears. "Emily, please, we need to talk. We've lost everything. We don't know what else to do." Emily's father, Richard, stood behind her, his face hardened with frustration. "You can't just cut us off like this," he said sharply. "We're your family. Emily crossed her arms and leaned against the doorframe. Family? Is that what you call this? Because what I've experienced doesn't feel like family, it feels like exploitation. Linda's tears began to fall as she clasped her hands together. We made mistakes, Emily. We know that now. But we're struggling, we've had to sell the condo, your father's car was repossessed, and we're living with Ryan in his tiny apartment. We're begging you, please help us. Emily's gaze shifted to Ryan, who looked away uncomfortably. She could see the guilt etched into his face, but it wasn't enough to soften her resolve. You're asking for help now? Emily said, her voice rising slightly. After years of lying to me? After laughing at me behind my back while I worked myself into exhaustion to support your lifestyle? Richard stepped forward then, his tone turning defensive. We never meant for it to go this far. But you have no idea how hard it's been for us. Emily's laugh was bitter and sharp. Hard? You mean hard like working 60-hour weeks while skipping vacations and cutting corners on my own life so I could send you money for fake emergencies? Or hard like watching screenshots of your group chat where you mocked me for being stupid enough to believe your lies? Ryan finally spoke up, his voice low and hesitant. Emily. I know we messed up. But they're really struggling now. They need you. Emily shook her head slowly, her expression unreadable. No, she said firmly. What they need is to take responsibility for their actions. And what I need is to protect myself from people who see me as nothing more than a bank account. Linda sobbed openly now, reaching out as if to touch Emily's arm, but Emily stepped back into the doorway. Please, Linda whispered through her tears. We've learned our lesson. Emily met her mother's eyes with a steady gaze. Have you? She asked softly. Because all I'm hearing is how much you've suffered since I stopped paying for everything. Not a single word about how much your betrayal hurt me. Richard's face flushed with anger again as he snapped, You're being unreasonable. We're your parents. After everything we've done for you. Emily cut him off sharply, Everything you've done for me? Like what? Manipulating me? Mocking my generosity? Taking advantage of my kindness? Tell me exactly what you've done for me that wasn't self-serving. The silence that followed was deafening. I think we're done here, Emily said finally, stepping back and placing one hand on the door. Linda tried one last time, Emily, please don't do this. We're family. Emily's voice was calm but resolute as she replied, Family doesn't treat each other the way you treated me. She looked at each of them in turn before adding, I hope you figure things out, I really do, but I won't be part of it anymore. With that, she closed the door firmly and locked it. For a moment, she stood there in the quiet of her home, listening to their muffled voices outside as they argued among themselves, before finally leaving. She didn't feel guilt or regret, only a profound sense of relief. Walking back into her living room, Emily sank onto the couch and let out a long breath. She knew this wasn't the end, there would likely be more attempts to guilt or manipulate her in the future. But for now, for this moment, she felt free. And that freedom was worth everything she had lost along the way. 2 weeks had passed since Emily had closed every financial tie with her family, and the fallout was swift and brutal. The life they had built on her generosity began to crumble, piece by piece. Emily heard about it through mutual acquaintances and social media posts she hadn't yet unfollowed. Her parents' lakeside condo was listed for sale, the luxury car her father had proudly driven was repossessed, and their once frequent golf outings disappeared from their social media feeds. The country club membership, a status symbol they had cherished, was cancelled, and with it went the circle of friends they had cultivated there. Emily felt a strange mix of emotions as she learned these updates. There was a flicker of guilt, but it was quickly overshadowed by a sense of validation. They were finally facing the consequences of years of deceit and indulgence. For so long, she had carried the weight of their financial stability on her shoulders, sacrificing her own dreams to keep them comfortable. Now, they were forced to confront the reality they had avoided for years. Her brother Ryan wasn't spared from the fallout either. A text from him arrived late one night. Mom and Dad are moving into my spare room next week. They sold the condo. Dad's furious about it. Emily read the message without responding, her resolve unshaken. A few days later, another text followed. The condo is officially on the market. Dad's car got repossessed yesterday. This is getting really bad. For a brief moment, Emily considered replying, maybe even offering to help with moving expenses, but then she remembered one particular screenshot from their secret group chat. Jordan just asked if Dad was doing okay after his doctor's appointment for the heart issue that doesn't exist. The memory of their mockery hardened her heart once more. They had made their choices, now they were living with the consequences. As weeks turned into months, Emily began to hear less and less about her family's struggles. She assumed they were adjusting to their new reality, or perhaps they had simply run out of people willing to listen to their complaints. Then, one evening, an email arrived from an unfamiliar address, with the subject line, "Message from your parents." The email detailed how they had been forced to sell most of their furniture, how her father's health was deteriorating from stress, and how they had applied for food stamps, something her proud father found humiliating. It ended with a plea, "They just want a chance to talk to you, to explain and apologize." Emily stared at the email for a long moment before hitting delete without hesitation. She knew better than to fall for their manipulative tactics again. Their idea of an apology would only be whatever they thought might reopen the flow of money, and she was done being their ATM. The weeks that followed brought an unexpected sense of peace. For the first time in years, Emily's money was hers alone to spend or save as she pleased. She signed up for a pottery class she'd always wanted to take, booked a solo trip to Italy for the summer, and even started looking at homes in neighborhoods she used to think were out of her reach. The guilt that had once plagued her was fading, replaced by something far more powerful, freedom. But just as Emily began settling into this newfound sense of independence, another knock came at her door one evening. Through the peephole, she saw them, her parents, sitting on her porch steps like ghosts from a life she no longer recognized. Her father looked thinner than she remembered, his once pristine clothes now worn and wrinkled. Her mother's carefully maintained highlights had grown out, revealing streaks of gray. Emily hesitated for a moment before opening the door slightly. "What are you doing here?" she asked, flatly. Her mother's voice cracked as she spoke, "Emily, please, we just want to talk." Her father added quickly, "We've learned our lesson." Emily stepped outside but left the door partially closed behind her. "You have 5 minutes," she said, coldly. They perched awkwardly on the porch steps while Emily stood above them, arms crossed defensively. Her mother began, "We're sorry, we never should have taken advantage of your generosity." Her father nodded solemnly. "We've lost everything, the condo, the car, we've been living with Ryan in his tiny apartment." Her mother chimed in, "I'm sleeping on a pull-out couch in his living room, we've applied for food stamps, we're humiliated." Emily listened silently as they listed everything they had lost, but noticed something glaringly absent from their words, any acknowledgement of how deeply they had hurt her. When they finally fell silent, Emily asked calmly, "Is that it?" Her mother looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Emily said firmly, "is that all you came here to say? Because all I'm hearing is how much you've suffered since I stopped paying for everything, not a single word about how your betrayal affected me." Her father bristled slightly at her tone but said nothing. "You don't get it," Emily continued, shaking her head slowly. "This isn't about money anymore, it's about trust. And you broke it." Her mother's face hardened slightly as she replied, "So you're just going to keep punishing us over a few jokes?" Emily laughed bitterly at that. "A few jokes? Is that what you call years of manipulation? Years of lying to me while mocking my kindness behind my back?" Her father stood abruptly then, his face flushed with anger. "We're your parents," he said sharply. "After everything we've done for you." "What exactly have you done for me?" Emily interrupted, her voice rising slightly but still controlled. "Besides take and take and take?" He had no answer. Emily took a deep breath before speaking again. "I hope you figure things out, I really do, but I can't be part of your lives anymore. She stepped back toward the door as her mother pleaded one last time, Emily, please don't do this, we need you. That's the problem, Emily said softly but firmly as she opened the door behind her. You don't need me, you need what I can provide. And with that, she closed the door. As she leaned against it, listening to their footsteps retreat down the path, Emily expected to feel guilt or sadness, but instead, all she felt was peace. For the first time in years, she was free, and that freedom was worth everything she had lost along the way. 6 months after cutting ties with her family, Emily sat in her new apartment, a cozy space filled with light and warmth that reflected the peace she had worked so hard to achieve. The journey had been painful, but it had also been transformative. For the first time in years, she felt like she was living for herself, not for the expectations or demands of others. Her days were now filled with things she loved, pottery classes, long runs by the lake, and evenings spent with friends who truly cared for her. She had even started planning a trip to Italy, a dream she had put on hold for far too long. The guilt that once lingered in the corners of her mind had faded, replaced by a quiet confidence that she had made the right decision. One evening, as she watered the plants on her balcony, her phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. She hadn't heard from him in months, and for a moment, she considered ignoring it. But curiosity got the better of her. The message was short, Mom and Dad are moving into a smaller apartment. They're managing now. Just thought you'd want to know. Emily stared at the screen for a moment before setting the phone down. She felt no urge to respond, no pang of guilt or sadness, just relief that they were finally taking responsibility for their own lives. It wasn't her job to fix them anymore. Later that night, as she sat journaling by candlelight, Emily reflected on everything that had happened. She thought about the betrayal, the anger, and the heartbreak, but also about the strength she had found within herself. Cutting ties had been one of the hardest decisions of her life, but it had also been one of the most empowering. She wrote in her journal, "Family isn't defined by blood, it's defined by love, trust, and mutual respect. I've learned that I deserve those things, and I won't settle for less." As she closed the journal and prepared for bed, Emily felt a deep sense of closure. The chapter with her family was over, but a new one was just beginning, one where she was free to live authentically, unapologetically, and on her own terms. For Emily, this wasn't just an ending, it was a beginning. A life free from manipulation and full of possibilities stretched out before her. And for the first time in years, she felt truly at peace.